So, Moisés, I want to take you back to March 8th and the Austin game against Colorado. Not something I like to visit a lot, but I want you to keep that kind of point in the timeline in mind. And then I want to take you forward to April 26th when Austin will face Houston. We might be there in person. Still working out the details on that. But do you know what those two games have in common?
Not right off the top of my head.
7:30 start times. Do you know what's happened in between those two games? Not 7:30 start
Hmm.
times. A
Hmm.
lot of afternoon games. We got 6:45 tonight for some mysterious reason. Next week it's going to be a 6:30 kick in Vancouver. I like the daytime starts because I am not a vampire.
Yeah, I mean, some people like being up until 2 in the morning to watch one weekend soccer game. Some people like to
Not
get
me.
up at 2 in the morning to be ready to watch a Saturday soccer game. But
Also not me.
yeah, that's not my favorite in either direction. I think that acknowledging the existence of the sun is not a bad idea in the months of the year when it isn't 110 degrees outside in certain markets that will go unnamed, including ours. I feel like it's probably been the folly of man that due deference to the sun has not been given. I think it's part of why we're in the heap of trouble that we're in.
Will we play soccer in caves in the future?
You got to adapt. You got to be ready for anything. You got to have a different kind of verticality under the ground.
Emergency podcast. They did a thing, so we gotta talk about it. Emergency podcast. It's an emergency. Emergency podcast. Shut up, oh yeah, shut up, oh yeah, shut up. Emergency podcast. It's an emergency.
Hey, a hearty hello to you all, and welcome to Emergency Podcast, the Austin FC podcast, where we talk about all the Austin FC emergencies. We are back, ready to preview this match against Portland, this rematch, and a lot of other things to talk about, certainly. We got a baby in the future, lots of things to visit. How are you doing, and what is foremost on your mind?
I'm looking forward to seeing this adaptability that Nico Estevez has discussed as it applies to the second leg, as it were, with the Portland Timbers. I'm looking for a show tonight. I'm good, bopping along. It's a little rainy. It's looking to be a cold game day tonight as we record this Saturday morning. Why are we recording this Saturday morning? Well, look, the real emergency, Phil, would be if we had recorded before we got the very
Mhm.
dramatic Riley Thomas, fourth and final first team call up news. That to me is a great reason to make sure that we wait until the very last conceivable minute before game day starts to record.
I kind of feel like he's heading towards a supplemental deal,
Yeah,
but we'll see how that transpires. I mean, it sounds like Dessler's going to be out a few more weeks.
mm-hmm.
So if you're looking for a right back sub and he's that, and you're using his last short-term agreement, he has not made an appearance, by the way, but that does not matter if you get called up 4 times, regardless of how many times you appear, and twice is the most that you can do that. Then you either don't get to do that anymore, or you have to be called up to the first team roster.
And we've speculated that maybe that supplemental deal was in the offing based on how enthusiastic they have been to burn through his 4 rosterings, if not appearancings. Having seen him play a couple times for the second team, this kid has not let up from his really stellar college record and seems to be just ready to show up and put in the shift. So good for him, provided it ends up happening. It's been nice that we've gotten actual comments from the coach, from his fellow
Mhm.
players
Yep.
about
Yep.
these second team guys and the way that they have worked in with the first team rather than just those kids. We'll see if anything ever happens with them. Just direct praise for Frank. Look, I'm going to be Nico. Nico put it this way in the midweek press availability. We were surprised. We were
Mhm.
surprised he showed up in the form that he did, and he's been very impressive. And you reward that by actually giving them those minutes. Last I checked, Phil, is he U22 or is he at 22?
Riley Thomas celebrated his 23rd birthday on March 15th.
There we go. Riley Thomas, Thomas Riley. So
23-year-old kid. He's going places.
he's not U22, which look, take some bloom off the rose. Let's be honest. To some people, I'm mostly joking, doesn't really matter. But yeah, he is in, if you think about it, the prime of his playing career before he has hit a lot of those recurring injuries that are just going to happen. He's got the rubber on the tires. They ought to get him out on the track. This is exactly the kind of durability that we have talked about repeatedly being an issue, not just for Austin, but for a lot of MLS teams, where there are a lot of journeyman players who are on a journey, man, and have worn a lot of that rubber off the tires. So I think speculatively, I think it's a good move. He seems like he's got a good temperament. This does not seem like a sporting operation that just throws dice at the wall.
Yeah. And again, I mean, they've got plenty of supplemental spots. So if you're spending one of those on a 23-year-old domestic player who can fill in at fullback, I think that's absolutely just fine. I did not know that we were going to start with a Riley Thomas update. And of course, we're already several hours into our day because we got up to suffer watching an Arsenal match this morning. So we're not going to talk about that at all. Instead, we're going to talk about happier things, a 3-match win streak. And just wondering, is this sustainable? They have twice in 2022 reached the 4-match win streak territory. Of course, they can do that tonight if they beat Portland in this rematch from, of course, the second game of the season. Of course, this was for me the at a gala going to Whataburger after the gala, 89th minute, David DaCosta free kick goal while I'm in a Whataburger line game. Again, we're not gonna revisit the Whataburger stuff either, because apparently I'm in the minority in terms of the theory. But let's talk about whether or not this is sustainable if they can beat Portland and then go on to Vancouver next week with that weird 6:30 start time and extend that win streak to 5.
The superstition aspect of it, back-to-back wins against Cascadia teams, I feel like that's a part of what's on the line here. They've got to go into that Vancouver game in proper form, having dominated part of the Pacific Northwest. Joking aside, I think that there is that kind of energy going on where they are wanting that breakthrough Golasso Fest kind of game that they have not had yet. And I feel like there is a better opportunity for that at home against Portland necessarily than there is on the other side of squeaking out a 1-0 win against Portland and going away to Vancouver and playing on turf.
The weird turf,
strangest turf, the place where they don't have roofs, they have canopies or whatever it is that they officially refer to their roof at BC Place. I feel like there is something that can't be discounted about having a 3-game heater at the beginning of the season, which the beginning of MLS seasons as a theme for a lot of clubs, even the ones that do relatively well. There is a slog aspect to it. There is working people in, there is finding a new rhythm. It seems like a lot of that rhythm is coming together and there's a lot of jazz going on. And where there hasn't been yet, there is a lot of pent up interest in really breaking through from some of the top paid players on the team. You'd expect that a home game is where that kind of dam's going to break.
Right. Yeah, and again, in the meantime, got lots of defense that's been happening, and we got Brendan Hines-Ike in the midweek press availability. And Brendan Hines-Ike is 2025's version of Ethan Finley, and that we talked to him, and so we're going to get a lot of good stuff. We're going to get a lot of candid observations from weathered veteran, and he had a lot of really interesting things to say about their ability to defend in the low block and then wanting to be able to take that higher up the field. I thought that was really refreshing. My article that came out yesterday recapping the press conference had a lot of that, just because I really gravitated towards that, and I thought that was really interesting to see him break it down. Obviously, 3 goals allowed in 6 games. Only St. Louis has done better in terms of goals allowed. Brad Stuber hasn't had that much to do. He's had some good saves here and there. Certainly had the one against St. Louis last week, but a lot of it has just been when that ball gets into the low block, into their own box, they're able to defend that really savagely and really well in ways that we've seen flashes of that, but it just seems more cohesive this year for some reason. And I guess you got to probably attribute some of that to coaching.
For me, it's that he shouldn't have as much to do as he has over the last couple of seasons. You love seeing a player do well, but you don't want your goalie to be overloaded because your back line is performing like Swiss cheese. I feel like this is very good, positive progress to your point. A thing I wanted to mention about Brendan Hines-Ike, when Ilie is not on the field, generally it's BHI who's carrying the armband. That says something. And I think that he has settled in nicely to a calm, cool, collected, level-headed captaincy kind of presence on the field, whether he's wearing the armband or not. He is not the young party guy that you have in other spaces on the roster, and is always there to put in the shift and do the work, whether he's doing it next to Julio, whether he's doing it next to Svatak, who he calls Svati. It's nice to know that the Ukrainian brick wall has nicknames going on. We've discovered that, yes, he does indeed smile. Maybe it's the
Rarely,
unique
but yes.
personality of Brendan Hines-Ike that brings out that joy in the man who takes things so seriously. I think that the defensive posture, thinking about that personality really being centered around Brendan, is something that I think speaks to the general character of what the defense of this team is now.
You could make an argument that he's the first really kind of difference-making roto signing. It wasn't that long ago that he came in late to camp out of obscurity. He was cast aside along with a lot of other players on DC United after kind of a challenging year for them. But it's been a revelation just to see him develop and grow over time and to get more comfortable with that leadership role on the team. Definitely good. Yeah. The other thing I wanted to touch on was shot quality. I did a big, deep, nerdy dive into things. April 3rd article, when a soccer player and a ball love each other very much. You can catch that over on verdeallday.com if you want to point your browser there. And Sebastian Bush, who does a lot of really amazing work with that MLS Analytics Blue Sky account, did a look at all the XG that all the teams have accumulated dating back to 2013, focusing on Verde for this one. And the thing that kind of jumped out so far this year is that this isn't very revelatory. When they get shots inside the box and they get better chances, they tend to do much better than when they don't. In their 2 losses, they only had one of what's called great XG chances, which, and again, ASA, American Soccer Analysis, does their XG a little bit different than Opta and FOTMob and all that, but I think actually maybe a little bit better. They put a lot of thought into what they do stat wise. So great XG is anything is 0.33 or above. Generally, those shots will go in at a little over half the conversion rates. So if you get 2 great chances, it's likely that you're getting 1 goal out of those. In the match against San Diego, they did better than they did in the 2 losses where they only had 1 great chance. And of course, not to revisit that Colorado match, but that was the Uzuni chance in front of goal in the Colorado match that he flubbed and was certainly very upset about. Nico talked a little bit about that in the midweek when you got to ask him that question, and he just went through some of the quality shots they've had and just the emphasis that they need to do that more. But I think, again, it's a matter of getting closer into goal, taking those chances, maybe not being as speculative from outside. We've seen that a little bit this year. I think as they get more comfortable with each other, they create better chances. I mean, you certainly saw that in the St. Louis game, right? You saw Bukuri doing the one-on-one work and then getting the ball to Uzuni and picking his head up finally and finding Uzuni because he sees everything, as he told us.
Yeah, that Uzuni Incredible Hulk moment was pure gold, man.
He's a treasure.
Myrto Hulk smash ball. He smashed ball in net. He see everything. That was wonderful. And if you're gonna have Zlatan Ibrahimovic energy, that's the version of Zlatan Ibrahimovic energy you want to see. You look at the way that these players interact with each other in the brief, candid moments that you see. A lot of people in the stadium have an opportunity to see the way that people comport themselves to each other and give each other hugs and that kind of thing on the field. In those little moments that we get to see on the training field, you see Myrto and Danny heading toward the locker room with their arms around each other and joking, giving each other stick. And it feels like he really has settled in nicely to the vibe. He is buds with a bunch of these guys. He's chummy with them, and they all have different personalities, but you don't want to have the kind of big, bold, I'm going to make those plays, I'm going to make those goals, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, and it not be backed up by some vibe of camaraderie, because not everybody is a Zlatan who's going to show up and do what he did mere minutes after coming onto the field for LA Galaxy when he debuted. That to me is what has me sticking on the optimism train when it comes to performance overall. Taking the shots that actually matter, taking the shots that are worth taking, to Nico's point. Here's a departure. To be fair to Josh Wolf, Josh would say on occasion of, why are we going to take shots that are not good shots? He did say something to the effect of what Nico has said here. which to me is not a reason for concern. And it's just realistically, you can have a million shots on the board, but if you're not taking good shots, you're not taking good shots. Let's say Austin had hit 5-6 additional shots against St. Louis just for the sake of trying to get some shots. The way that they were defending, that I don't know that would have actually improved much of anything other than their total shots metric. I think there is judiciousness there, and I know that it's a difficult thing for fans to see of why are there not more shots on the board? Why are they not shooting? Well, the other team's doing a good job of defending. That's the easy answer in a lot of cases that isn't fun to watch. Jumping back to Brendan Hines-Ike for a second, to one of his points about what's boring. People don't blast off fire and change the lights and scream all across the stadium because a center back cleared something. A goal, they'll do that.
Right.
It's a lot easier to celebrate the very obvious thing to celebrate. That's to me, the overall vibe of where things are is that, is it frustrating that they're not scoring more? Yeah, sure. And I don't think it's for lack of trying at the end of the day.
Right. Yeah. So a couple things on that. Yeah. Talking about Wolf, and again, yeah, kind of similarities to what Nico said. I think the main difference, though, is how they're getting in position for those shots, right? I mean, with Wolf, we talked about that kind of rigidity. They take the ball down, they cross it, they hope, things like that. There's a lot more, I think, kind of creativity and flexibility so far in what Nico is doing, just because there's this kind of willingness to adjust. Again, in 22 with Wolf, when we saw fullbacks as kind of fulcrums, that was a way where, unfortunately, the rest of the league kind of caught on to that, but that was something where there was some innovation going on, and we were seeing some creativity, and we were seeing lots and lots of goals as a result. Nico seems to be a little bit more willing to, maybe he's got these principles, but to shift away from those. And in terms of Uzuni, Brad Stuver is kind of the consummate just dude who's good at lots of sports and then gravitates towards soccer, and he keeps doing soccer and soccer, versus Uzuni, who seems to be created in this sort of soccer laboratory, right? So where you have all the kind of like requisite soccer things, including Louis Vuitton, in order to be, you know, kind of fully embodying soccer, which is what I see Uzuni doing. That he is living at 100%. We're gonna get to something interesting with him in a little bit here once we get on the other side of previewing Portland.
Your point about the differences with when Josh would say this and where things are now, I think that's what is going to carry us into what will be, I feel like, a more interesting Portland match than I think people may be expecting based on sense memory over the last couple of years. You don't have the last couple of seasons and go into a home fixture against a team that you just barely lost at the death to in an away match a few weeks ago. I feel like people are at the most optimistic in a lot of cases, bracing for a draw or not expecting much. As that cold wind that is set to come in tonight comes through, I feel like Portland, Phil Neville could get a little surprised.
Right. And again, yeah, does Austin add to that 223 minutes of defending a 1-goal lead, which, again, 223 heart and mouth moments. They're not a lot of fun as fans to clench and hope and all that, but they've been effective so far. Law of averages, I'm a little bit scared of them not being able to hold on to that kind of 1-goal lead streak forever. They've only had a 2-goal lead for 8 minutes out of the season, but they also haven't been behind that much so far this season, just kind of given where they're at right now. It's a way to win. It's a kind of challenging way to win, obviously, because you are leaning a lot on the defense and you are having to absorb a lot of that pressure, and it can be fatiguing. But if you do it right and you do it well and you're drilled in it, then it is something. But again, yeah, I don't know. Is that sustainable over a full season, or does the dam need to burst? We all want the dam to burst at some point and get some offensive stuff going, so we don't have to worry necessarily about holding on to a 1-goal lead.
You know, maybe things will change with O'Reilly cycling in through the back line.
Okay. That 23-year-old kid's going places.
I'm telling you.
Portland, the rematch. What are you looking for in this one? What are maybe kind of some keys to things? So you've got Phil Neville doing much better than expected. They kind of handed Houston their hat last week on national TV. That was kind of fun to watch as an Austin fan.
Frankly, a lot of people doing that to Houston of late. You wanna just give the credit to Neville, but at the same time, I feel like they could have put him away more solidly. And that should be a reason for concern for Portland. I think they may come into this a little bit overconfident based on the previous win, based on coming off of a pretty decisive win against Houston, as you said. I feel like what Austin's got to do is put them on the back foot fast. I'm talking Diego Rubio, who is apparently out with a hamstring injury. Diego Rubio in the first 12 seconds of the game, putting him on the back foot kind of thing. Momentum wise, I think that's what they need to do is scatter, shock, and disorganize a Portland team that has been playing very well organized soccer and has had a pretty solid head on their shoulders. Let them be put off by that overconfidence early and keep them on the back foot as much as you can. Keep them having to adjust and adapt.
Yeah. And I do think also that on the defensive end, neutralizing DaCosta is going to be key. He's not the player right now that I think he's going to be as he acclimates to MLS by midseason or late season, but obviously still really talented. And certainly, I mean, with Dreyer against San Diego, you saw, despite Austin escaping that game, you saw what a really good creator can do against this defense still, the kind of creation of havoc that can happen. So I do think that in order to be able to not only get on a better offensive track than they have, like you're talking about putting them on the defensive fairly early, but also just being mindful of that and the kind of threat that he creates. Jonathan Rodriguez hasn't really done what he's been expected to do so far this year, but Anthony stepped up, Felipe Morris stepped up. They have good attackers. They're not necessarily name attackers, but they're not a bad team by any stretch. They are sixth in the West right now. There were some concerns going into the season, but they seem to be answering those pretty much right away. It's a good test, particularly at home, that expectation of trying to get 3 points at home consistently. I don't think that this is necessarily a slam dunk sort of game by any stretch. I do think it's winnable. I do think that they can get to that 4-game win streak, which again is staggering to say, right? So we were kind of concerned about that out of the gate, even though these seem like a pretty good manageable first 7 games. But if you're coming out of this, 5-2, still haven't drawn yet. So maybe a draw's in the card, law of averages, but 5-2 or 4-2-1, that's pretty respectable for a stretch of the season where you should be acquiring points and getting yourself into a position to be in playoff contention, right? So banking points early, I think, is pretty integral to success, as we saw in 2022 and as we did not see those subsequent years.
Yeah, I feel like there's a lot of pressure on, and that can have its own effect because this being a potential early season pivot point of having that additional home win, having some of that kind of run of play momentum that they've been wanting to see outside of the practice pitch. That's the kind of stuff that they really need to deliver on. And if Portland ends up frustrating them in the first half and putting Austin in stasis, as it were, and just having to live in that liminal state for a while, that is something that could keep us on that similar path of defending a 1-0 lead, a 1-0 win, and that having its own frustrating effect. Maybe then motivating to have a crazy Golazo Fest away win in Vancouver against the top team in the West. Hey, that wouldn't be bad for them. Sure wouldn't be bad. But there are a lot of those kinds of dynamics at play where there is the mental game to be considered aside from the on the board stats of things. What is going on in Brandon Vasquez's head? Him scoring a brace in this game, something that is going to help unlock him. Is it finding that kind of dynamic between him and another one of his teammates to feed that brace happening? Brandon Vasquez made it clear that he is not comfortable and happy with a single goal in a game. He wants to hit multiple goals in a game. And it feels like that is something that if we get to see that from Brandon today, that might make things a little bit more fluid, make him unclench a bit, because there is that anxiety that builds up when it's just not quite happening. Buka getting that assist, that helped push things in the other direction for him. I'm fully convinced, where he was on a bit of a dry spell, where various people, if you ask me, ill and misinformed, were calling for his head. We're saying transfer him, get rid of him. I think that's insane. When you've got the quality that he's got, he just is finally surrounded by an overall roster that plays well with what he is good at doing. And you just have to find that rhythm. I feel like my optimistic but reasonable expectation is that tonight is all about carrying forward and transforming the existing momentum into something productive going forward.
Yeah, and that would be good to see, definitely. And to that point, Vasquez against San Diego, he knew he could have gotten more than one goal for sure, because definitely the chances were there. He knew the fans, I think, were a little frustrated. He was definitely frustrated, probably more so than the fans. And it's going to be interesting. You had said needed to deliver on at one point. And speaking of needed to deliver on, we did learn something about Uzuni. This was something that we covered when we talked to Nico preseason in our exclusive interview, but we got a little bit more of a timetable now about when Uzuni is going to travel back to Barcelona to be with his wife to welcome a new child into the world.
Yeah, so next 10 days is when Mrs. Uzuni is expected to deliver. And
anything can happen, according to Nico.
Anything could happen. And that speaks to, hey, a guy who was forged in the labs of soccer, who was scientifically assembled for world football and nothing else. Some people reacted with surprise of, what do you mean he's not going to get just immediately on a plane? They had a lot of conversations about this kind of thing. And it could be that, being as business minded as he is, if it means the difference between not seeing his newborn for a couple days and playing in the Vancouver game versus not, I feel what that translates to me is that everything's on the table, as Nico said. It's totally reasonable to look at it from a Zuni standpoint of, well, I'm going to be out for a little bit to see the newborn. When is it crucially most important for me to be with the team? And I feel like it's not for lack of wanting to see his newborn kid, as some might want to intimate. I think it is much more about, I'm here for the team, I'm here for the fans, I'm here for this. He says that, and I think I take that completely as given. That is 100,000% the way that he sees his role on this team. That's just who the guy is.
Right. So on one hand, you can bear witness to this amazing miracle, this bringing of life that you help create. But also, if you have this opportunity to play on Vancouver's weird turf, why not do that? And actually, to be serious, this game has a lot more import than it did coming out of the gates. You did not expect Austin versus Vancouver to be a potential top two teams in the West mega matchup. But that's, again, the beauty of MLS. Nico was talking about in Europe, you know who those top teams are going to be, and you know who those teams facing relegation are going to be. In MLS, every year is different. Who knew that removing Vanni Sartini and the changes that Vancouver had was going to result in a team that is actually, dare I say, better than they were last year, which I didn't expect at all, because I thought they were a pretty solid team last year. But with their new manager and just retaining key players that they did, they're top of the West. It's weird. Who knew? So we'll see how it shuffles this week heading into that match. But again, it's still an early season matchup with some significant playoff implications. Did a lot of people predict that heading into the season? Probably not. Ask the pundits, look where they put Austin, look where they put Vancouver. They did not put them in these spots. But again, MLS, it's magical.
This is not put on because we're on the Austin beat optimism, but you just look at the numbers on the board, and in a matter of 2 weeks, Austin could be challenging both Miami and Vancouver reasonably for the Supporters' Shield in terms of where the standings are this early in the season. It's not unreasonable to believe that is possible. And yes, it is mathematically possible. Yes, even with the Messi effect, even with the curve to the standings that Miami merely existing does, it's not outside the realm of possibility. And I don't mean that as a, well, it's mathematically possible. It is mathematically possible. And based on the way things are trending, it's on the Austin players and coaching staff to make it happen. They can make that happen. They can manifest that over the next couple of weeks. And we'll see how or if they do. It could be that this match tonight and the one next week against Vancouver make that LA Galaxy home match have yet more import than I think emotionally, superstitionally things might be in Austin facing the reigning champions, who are not having a great season of their own, but are still worth worrying about. The last thing you want to worry about is the last thing you want to not worry about is a sleeping giant who might be getting over a stub toe, where they've got players of quality, they've got players who can be dangerous, they've got players who can surprise Austin you don't want to come out of maybe these next two games doing well and underestimating LA Galaxy just because here's what the pundits are saying, here's what everybody's saying.
Yeah, for sure. And I must confess, I just briefly spiraled off into a fantasy land of Austin hosting Miami in an MLS Cup. Could that happen? Could you imagine? Could you imagine just coming off the All-Star game and a few months later, it's Messi and Suarez and company coming to Austin for a title? This is very premature, of course. But,
very premature. Very premature. But yet, the thing that I keep coming around to that I've been beating the drum on, and it's not a fun or sexy thing to beat the drum on, is that Austin's roster construction, knowing that Roto has tipped his hand that he's definitely bringing somebody in the summer, the roster depth, the roster health that they have, you can have Diego Rubio go out with a minor hamstring injury for a couple of weeks because you're not absolutely desperate to play Diego Rubio minutes in every single competitive match. That's a great luxury to have. You can deploy the director of the dark arts as you need him, and you can rest him and rehab him and keep him healthy without season-ending, career-ending injury, because every single thing is always on the line every time he plays. I feel like looking at what's happening across the rest of the league as I rush to watch MLS wrap-up before they yank it away into the night, as it used to be easy to watch wrap-up a couple days later, and now it's more and more difficult. It seems like there's a fair amount of rebuild going on. It happens every season, but the way that the cards are dropping, it seems like a lot of folks are having a pretty up and down beginning of the season when it comes to injuries, when it comes to going really hard in cup competitions. There's a lot of mileage being put on a bunch of tires around the league when it comes to top performing teams, even though relatively soon Austin is going to be playing an Open Cup. I feel like Austin has the roster depth to be able to survive a deep run in Open Cup on top of continuing to perform in league play.
Right. And you talked about the Rubio injury, and I think even more to that point, to build on that, is the Dessler injury, right? You have a starting right back who's out for a significant period. As soon as we saw that injury happen in front of us in the press box, it was pretty grim. We knew, oh yeah, he's going to be out for a number of weeks. Gallagher's done great. And now if they bring Thomas on a supplemental, you have that kind of extra body if you need that. And they're just chugging along, and their defense is still functioning really well without one of their key defensive players. We saw in 23 just what a house of cards like one injury was, and turning into more injuries. And then all of a sudden you got Alex Ring playing center back. It's not optimal. But yeah, like to your point, Roto has built a team, and I think he understands that an MLS season is long and there's a lot of travel and there are these additional competitions, and you have to have some depth. With MLS, you don't have to have hugely successful defenders across the board. You've got a level of defenders versus a level of attackers in MLS, but you have to have this level of competence and ability. And then you have to, like we're seeing with Austin so far this year, they have to play as a cohesive unit. It's not so much, oh yeah, we're just going to plop Sergio Ramos in the middle of the field and we're going to be fine.
Yeah.
That's not how it works in MLS. But if you have players that are bought in, and you have good anchors, and then you have decent defenders that are around them, and you can play cohesively like Austin's done, you can hold on to 1-0 leads, as uncomfortable as that may be.
And I watch these little 2 or 3 minute The Austin Beat videos that they put out on their YouTube channel, but also are in the Season Pass channel. So if you watch it as a show, your favorite weekly 3-minute show, often without dialogue or a whole lot of editing, they just had the camera trained on the guys taking shots on goal, seeing the guys cycle in. When you don't necessarily see guys start or even necessarily play, sometimes people will forget about folks. And somebody that I would point to that people should not forget about is CJ Fodre, who made that valiant run to the flag. He did indeed capture the flag.
That is his move.
That is his move.
Need a guy to run to the flag. CJ's your guy.
He's got you. You need somebody to hype up the crowd. CJ is now allowed to do that. I feel like his speed and his level of fitness is important when it comes to running decoy plays Honestly, literally just trying to burn the last bit of rubber off of the opposing defense in the last minutes of a match. Boy, will they run right after that golden retriever. He takes off, they will take that bait every time. Looking at potentially having Uzuni out for a game or two, I feel like CJ working in and getting some minutes up top is not the worst thing, because a lot of these
Right.
teams are going to be looking at recency of tape. They're going to be looking at who has the DP tag on them. Preparing for Uzuni is, if anything, an advantage to Austin, because these are teams that are looking for defending against what Uzuni does. And if Uzuni's not on the field, then they may just let CJ play out on the wing like the lopsided striker that he is. He's a
Oh, this
striker.
balding youngster isn't going to trouble us.
Yeah, he's just a kid. He's just a 20-something teenager. Who cares? I think that kind of underestimation precisely is what has me as optimistic for some good play that is going to make us laugh. Because those of us who watch the team, watch the club, know what some of these guys' signature tricks are. And silly rabbit tricks are for kids. Some of these teams, I think, are going to find out. And I think that's going to start with Portland tonight. I don't think I'm being overly optimistic about that.
Yeah, I'm reasonably excited, which is a good thing to be heading into Q2. Before we wrap up, do we have any VerDos news that we want to touch on?
We have one thing that, with any bit of news like this, we're light on details and we're not going to get additional details. Tony Garcia released from the club by mutual agreement. So the number 7 is vacant on the second team. We'll see who picks it up. He did play for them a little bit this season. Who knows what happened? Any number of things. It doesn't necessarily mean that a player did something, but who knows? Player could have done something. The last time they released somebody by mutual agreement, I don't know that he's popped back up since. So sometimes you just have to make that call. And sometimes early in the life of these players, something just happens. Something doesn't work.
Yeah, and this past week they lost at Energizer Park in the second of 2 games. The first teams played, and then second teams got to run around on the chewed up pitch. Where's your head on this team now? Are you optimistic as you were a couple weeks ago about where they were and challenging for MLS Next Pro Cup and all that?
I think there's still serious contenders for it. A lot's going to come down to, they have a bye week this week, and then next week they play defending champions North Texas. Seeing what kind of form they're in against North Texas is what's going to determine the trajectory of not just, I think, this part of the season, but the rest of the season. If it's a loss at home, is that going to fuel the kind of fire in the tank that they need to have going into the rest of the early season? Is it going to frustrate and disorganize them? It's going to speak to the character of that second team as to how they handle a defending champion team that is in good form themselves, that has the head coach that they did at the beginning of last season, who built that team and was still around and consulting, but not directly head coaching them. Because when Nico got fired, John Gall moved over to the first team as an assistant coach for Dallas. He's now fully back with the reins in his hands for their second team. And that is a dangerous thing for every other team in MLS Next Pro, because that guy really understands that team, that roster. He built that roster. Him returning after not that long off as the gaffer, he is formidable with these players. And unlike other defending champion type teams, even though they have signed a bunch of second team guys from last season to first team contracts, various of them are still made available for second team play. So it's not that different of a roster as people might have you believe.
So when and was that match again? Because that seems like if you haven't really docked in on VerDos too much this year, that seems like that would be a really good one to watch. And obviously, there's a rivalry that is there that is maybe not there with some of the other teams that you encounter.
Friday, April 11th, and that was originally a 5:30 start time, got moved back to 7:30. Thank the gods, said everybody who has a standard workday, who likes going out to those games. So that game moving back is something that I think will benefit Austin, in that more of the crowd will actually be in the stands at kickoff time.
Right. Yeah. And there's not, of course, the day after, it's Austin at Vancouver. So there's not a first team home game to go to. So yeah, that is a potential thing for you to do on that particular Friday night. So that sounds like a lot of fun. And that is in 6 days. Wow. So coming right up. That's great. All right.
Yep.
Anything else we need to hit before we turn this over to editing and get this out before the game?
Not really, man. Got to turn this around. People have a game day drive time to listen to this. We'll be back next week, and we'll have some news of watch party happenings before they happen. For the home game, Los Verdes is doing a Chiullán brews with the people at Cap Metro, riding a train, drinking some beers, inviting along friendly Portland people with whom they will be enemies for 90 minutes, but friends on either side of it. Check out the Los Verdes social media for where the stops are. Could be that you can stop off at one of the stops in progress and join up with folks having a merry old time.
Yeah, pace yourself, hydrate between beers. Very important. Beer, water, beer. That is a better formula than just beer. Especially, it's a little bit earlier kick, but still pacing yourself, I think, is important. We're in the embryonic stages on perhaps doing our own Verde all day watch party, but that is something that we are kicking around. So wait for some details on that as we make our way towards that. We'll let you know once we have something that is a little bit more concrete, and you can perhaps hang out with us and get a flavor of what we do in the press box.
That is like the worst thing I've ever heard in the history of the 7 years that I've been on this planet.